I have got a fantastic story for you today, all about Easter. What Christians believe is the most important time of the year, when we remember and celebrate the most important thing that Christians believe has ever happened in all of history. And our story today is about a man who's mentioned in the Bible, but we don't know too much about him. But I wonder whether this special and perhaps rather strange day for him went a little bit like this. He would have woken up early in the morning as the sun started to shine through the window of the room that he was in. And as the sun started to shine through, he'd have perhaps started to open his eyes a bit, started to stretch a bit, thinking, I'm starting to wake up, a new day. And then maybe he remembered where he was, because he wasn't in any ordinary room, but he was actually in a prison cell in the jail. And then he might have remembered what day it was, that this day was going to be the day that he was going to die. Because you see, he was in prison for doing something really, really bad, and the punishment for that back at that time was that he was going to have his life taken away from him. But as he sat there, perhaps thinking about just how bad this day was going to be, he suddenly realized that things outside the prison window weren't as they normally would have been. You see, there was a courtyard outside the prison window, and normally it would have been quite quiet at this time of day, but there was a huge crowd of people packed out there. And so the man started to press his head against the bars of the window to try and hear and see what was going on outside. And as he listened, he could sort of see that this huge crowd of people were making a lot of noise, and so he couldn't quite make out what any single person was saying. But he tried to listen very carefully and tried to strain to see what was going on, because they were all looking towards the platform at the front of the courtyard. And out onto the platform came a man. Now he recognized this man. This was Pontius Pilate, the governor of the whole region. And then another man was led out onto the platform next to him. Now this man was chained up like a prisoner. But as the man looked out, he thought, I don't recognize him. I haven't seen him around the jail. He's not one of the other prisoners that have been here with me. And in fact, he doesn't look like a prisoner at all. In fact, he looks like someone who has never done anything wrong. Why on earth is he there? He doesn't look like somebody that should be chained up. And then he saw Pontius Pilate raise his hand up into the air to tell everyone to be quiet. And Pilate asked a question. Now, the man in the prison cell couldn't quite make out what he was saying. He tried to strain to hear, but he couldn't hear. But he could hear what the crowd shouted back. They called out, "Barabbas! Barabbas!" What's going on, the man thought as he peered out through the bars. You see, the reason that he was confused was because, that was his name. They were calling for him. He didn't know what the question was that had been asked, but he could hear that the crowd sounded really angry and they were calling his name. Why were they doing that? Didn't they know that he was already going to die today? What more could they want to be done to him? He tried to press his head closer to the bars to hear what was going on, to try to work out what was happening. Again, Pilate raised his hand into the air to ask another question. Again, he couldn't quite make out what the question was, but suddenly the crowd called out, "Crucify him! Crucify him!" Which meant to take somebody and place them upon a wooden cross and leave them hanging there until they died. Why were they doing this? Why were this crowd so angry? Why were they calling out for him to be crucified? Barabbas hung his head and he started to think about how his life could have been so different. If only he hadn't had those bad thoughts about things that were going on. If only he hadn't have said those bad things that he'd said to other people. If only he hadn't have done those bad things that he'd done. He wouldn't have ended up in this mess. He wouldn't have ended up in this prison cell. And he wouldn't have ended up with this being the day that he was going to die. You see, we're not locked up in a prison cell, but actually the Bible says we're a bit like Barabbas. That actually because of the bad things we think and the bad things we say and the bad things we do, actually they stop us from having the best life ever, from truly being free is what the Bible says. Because the Bible says those things stop us from getting to know God who made and created and loved us. But actually because he loves us so much, he's made a way to sort things out. I wonder as Barabbas was sat there on his stool as the day was going on, whether for the first time in a long time he looked up to God. Maybe he called out to him and said, "God, please, if there's any way, please, can you save me?" See, the Bible says that anybody who calls on the name of the Lord will be saved. See, the Bible says that anybody who calls out to God to be saved will be saved. Not saved from death like Barabbas was calling for here, but actually be saved from those things we've done that are wrong and be able to have life with God in heaven. And actually the Bible explains how that's able to happen. But I'll tell you about that in a bit. Well, as Barabbas was sat there, perhaps praying to God, he heard the sounds he didn't want to hear. The footsteps of one of the centurions making their way down the corridor. And then he heard the keys jangling in the lock and the door starting to slide open. "Barabbas," said the centurion, "get up. It's time to go." "Please, please, please," said Barabbas, "please, I don't want to die. Please, just give me more time." "What?" said the centurion. "You're not going to die. You're free. Get out of here." "What?" thought Barabbas. I'm free, but I'm meant to be killed today." "Get out of here," said the centurion. Barabbas thought, is this some kind of sick joke that the guards play with the prisoners? This isn't a nice thing to do. But as he walked towards the door, the centurion stepped out the way. He walked down the corridor, and the centurion just left him be, heading towards the gate into the courtyard. Barabbas didn't understand what was going on. Today should have been the day that he was taken and killed, but now he'd been set free. He wandered out through the gate of the prison. And as he peered out into the sunshine outside, he could see there was something happening on a hill just outside Jerusalem. There was a huge crowd of people making their way up the hillside. Barabbas knew just why they were making their way up that hillside, because, well, that was where people were taken to be crucified. That's where he should have been today. As he perhaps looked on, he would have seen one cross raised up into the air. A man he recognized from the prison, a robber who had done lots of things wrong. And Barabbas thought, well, yeah, I know that guy. He's a really bad guy. He deserves to be there. He deserves to be punished for what he's done. And then another cross was raised up. Again, Barabbas recognized this guy from the prison. Again, he thought, he deserves to be there. He's done things that are wrong. He deserves to be punished. And then he thought, well, there should have been 3 crosses there today. I should have been there too. I should have been punished for the things I've done that are wrong. But why am I free? And as Barabbas was perhaps wondering this, well, he might have seen that a 3rd cross was raised up. What, thought Barabbas? But that's where I was meant to be. That was my cross. Who's there instead of me? As he peered out and looked, he could see it was the man that had been standing on the platform next to Pontius Pilate earlier. The man who looked like he'd never done anything wrong. Why was he there? Barabbas grabbed somebody who was walking past. He said, "Hey, who is that guy? Who's that guy on the middle cross up there?" "That's Jesus," they said. Jesus, thought Barabbas. You see, Barabbas had heard about Jesus. Jesus was a great miracle worker. He'd done some amazing miracles. He'd healed people who couldn't see so that they could see again. He'd healed people who couldn't walk so that they could walk. He taught amazing things about God. Barabbas knew that he'd said that he was the Son of God, but Barabbas didn't understand why he would have been put on a cross. He'd never done anything wrong. And as Barabbas was watching on, this strange day for him got even stranger. You see, it got to the middle of the day, 12 o'clock, when the sun should have been brightest in the sky, and suddenly everything went dark. Darker than Barabbas had ever known it to be. And it stayed that way for 3 whole hours. Can you imagine that? When you're going out to play at lunchtime, when the sun should be bright in the sky, suddenly it's pitch black as though it's the middle of the night. It was very confusing. I wonder whether during that time Barabbas would have wandered up from where he was in Jerusalem, up that hill, to go and see what was happening where the crosses were. And as he wandered up that way, he could see the 3 crosses. The 2 robbers that he knew who deserved to be there, and then Jesus in the middle. As he stood close, well, the centurion recognized him. "Oh, Barabbas, that should have been you up there. You deserve to be up there. He doesn't." "But I don't understand what's going on." The centurion explained that Pilate had given the crowd a choice earlier. He'd asked them who he wanted them to set free? Did they want him to set free Jesus or Barabbas? And they'd chosen Barabbas, and then they'd chosen for Jesus to be crucified. Suddenly it all made sense to Barabbas. That was why they were calling his name, for him to be set free, and that's why they were calling crucify him, because they were going to put Jesus on the cross. But Jesus hadn't done anything wrong. As the centurion looked on at the scene and everything that was happening, he called out, "Truly, this man is the Son of God." You see, Jesus wasn't any ordinary man. He was God here on earth. And I wonder if as Barabbas looked on, he might have thought about the things that were happening, how he should have been there. And Barabbas would have been the first person in all of history to be able to look at the cross where Jesus was hanging and say, "He died for me." Barabbas was meant to be there, but Jesus died in his place. And you know, I'm able to say that just like Barabbas was. Now, I've never been in a prison cell. I wasn't meant to be put on a cross, but actually the Bible says because of the things that I've thought and said and done that were wrong, actually those things mean that I deserve to be punished, is what the Bible sort of says. And actually, you know, just like Barabbas was going to be. Not quite in the same way, but actually what the Bible says is it means those things mean, as I said, that we're separated from God. We can't get to be with him. But actually, because he loves us so much, God came as Jesus and lived a perfect life, never doing anything wrong, and then he died on a cross to take away all the things that you and I have done wrong so that anyone could be forgiven. And the Bible says it's not automatic. It doesn't just happen. But actually what Christians believe is that actually anybody, as the Bible says, who calls out on the name of the Lord, calls out to Jesus, can be saved. And you know, when I was a little bit older than you, that's just what I did. Somebody explained to me all about the cross, and I called out and I said, "Jesus, I'm really sorry for all the things I've done that are wrong. Will you please forgive me?" And because of what the Bible says, I believe that he's done that. And actually that's what he offers to do for anybody. And so that's why Christians think that Easter is the most amazing and incredible time ever. You might think that it's really sad because Jesus died on a cross, but actually Christians celebrate it and are happy because we believe that he died there for us so that we can become part of God's family and one day get to be with him forever. And actually we believe that it's all true because Jesus dying on the cross, of course, wasn't the end of the story. But 3 days later, on Easter Sunday, what we celebrate is that he came back to life and rose back into heaven where he's waiting for us. And so I hope that just explained a little bit more to you about Easter and why Christians think it's so important and why Christians celebrate it even though it seems like a sad time because it was when Jesus died on the cross. Well, I hope you enjoyed that story and I look forward to seeing you again soon. Bye.